We actually probably should get into AI, but before we do, just one thing on that one big beautiful bill, which is that there's a new income-driven repayment plan on it, caps on graduate and parent plus loans, new system for measuring and incentivizing student earnings outcomes that holds colleges and universities accountable for poor outcomes. In essence, degree programs where graduates' earnings are too low will lose access to federal funding. Phil Hill actually there did another good piece, I thought, pointing out some flaws in this, basically how it's like too blunt a measure of high school earnings based on state data as opposed to the local data, right? And if you're like in El Paso, it's very different from, say, Austin in Texas, for example. So here we are, Jeff, but these things strike me as changes that I just listed that actually may have a much bigger impact on the rest of higher ed, the non-selective institutions. And the billing in the media consistently seems to be that this was a bad bill for higher ed. I'm not sure that's my take, but I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, well, I think there are some bad aspects of it. It doesn't mean that higher ed can't come out of this by figuring out how to get around some of them. I think, first of all, on graduate education, this is going to cause some big problems for institutions that have really relied on graduate education as a cash cow for them, right? So, between the limits on graduate loans and the elimination of Grad PLUS, which would add on top of a grad loan in terms of what you could take out. Now, one interesting thing that could come out of this, Michael, is the private market could come back,
Right.
meaning that you could have all these private lenders working with colleges to help them make sure that their students get the money. There used to be this thing called the preferred lender list, which went away in the early 2000s because there were a lot of scandals by lenders essentially giving kickbacks to colleges, giving kickbacks to financial aid officers, taking them on, the booze cruise essentially during the financial aid officers meeting to make sure that they would get on those preferred lenders lists. There's a lot of regulations around that now. I don't think it's a bad thing if some of that stuff came back to help students get that. I think there's probably going to be some fixes to this bill over time. I think especially for med school, a lifetime limit of $200,000 on that, I think is going to be a problem. I think in other places, the cost hopefully will come down, but the cost curve is not going to bend overnight. I think it's not going to happen in time to avoid a elimination of a lot of programs. And that's not only at the graduate level, but I think even at the undergraduate level, where you have to see this return on investment of these programs, I think you're going to see a lot of programs disappear in the arts, social work, education. I think a lot of that's going to happen. And then I guess the final point I'll make here is the changes to income contingent loans. We're seeing some consolidation in there because of the big, beautiful bill. I'm not saying that what they had previously in the previous administrations were right, but I believe that this idea of income contingent loans is a thing that should be the primary way we pay back loans in the future. And I'm sorry that we didn't really have a bipartisan solution on that.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I have a somewhat different take, I think, on this. I think you're right. Short-term pain, no question. A lot of master's programs that, frankly, have been keeping colleges afloat are going to probably go away. And so there's going to be a lot of sort of challenges, right, in the short term there. I think long term, it sets up the industry, though, for better focus on ROI, which I think will actually make it more sustainable, more steadfast. Ultimately, I think it'll help higher ed thrive ultimately. I put this piece out where I sort of recounted this debate that we've had for a long time where I'm like, higher ed's getting disrupted. And you're like, higher ed is going to thrive despite. And my conclusion was, I actually think you're right, Jeff. But I think it will be because that institutions get clear about the value proposition, lower costs, or frankly, new blood comes in, buoyed by new accreditation that perhaps comes in if we have accreditation reform. On the med school thing, I feel like I'm in the skunk at the garden party on this one with Preston Cooper, who just feels like, hey, there's a really high ROI for med students, and so the private loan market can work for that pretty well. And as Ira Stoll wrote at his Substack, The Editors, between 51,000 and 63,000 students a year apply for the 20 to 23,000 spots that are even available for med schools. So like the problem isn't on the demand side, it's on the supply side, in my view. And we should see some innovation around that. But, I know that's not a popular opinion in higher ed, but I think it'll actually strengthen the sector in the longer run, even as there will be a short term hit.